Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. My name is Sam OMATSEYE. Welcome to Big Talk. I have a very important guest today. He's no other than Chigozie Obioma. He is a novelist and writer. He has a stature that is growing phenomenally worldwide, but we need to pay attention to him more here in Nigeria. He has just written a book titled An Orchestra of Minorities. His earlier novel, The Fisherman, was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. And I was hoping frenetically that he would win it then, but maybe this one will do it. Welcome to my show, Chigozie.
It's a great pleasure, sir, to be here.
Reading your novels, The Fisherman, and these, I get a sense that you are fascinated with myths, with religious mythology, stories, and so on. In The Fisherman, people have seen the story of Cain and Abel. And in An Orchestra of the Minorities, it's written by Chi, which is quite inventive because it's like a spirit writing a novel.
Yes.
But it's also seen in the light of the story of Odysseus and so on. So, in a modern world of individualism and of capitalism and so on, how do you come to reconcile all these myths with modern day quotidian experience?
Well, the thing for me, the trust, I think, is I've always had this impulse to create something that will be authentic and organic to the cultures in which I'm writing. So The Fisherman was set in Akure.
Yes.
And I wanted to create a story that would have the aesthetics of the belief system in the place. So we are people who believe so much in prophecies,
yes,
whether it be through the Christian religion or the Orisha, for instance,
yes,
religion. And An Orchestra of Minorities, it was mostly for me to try to look at what is the fundamental, central, axiomatic belief of the Igbo people, and how can I write a cosmological novel. So I chose the Chi, and I centered the story through the lens of the Chi.
In the case of the Fisherman, it looked like you were probing, as it were, also the Yoruba culture and bringing into it a lot of things. You brought June 12, you brought the crisis in the north, almost as if it had just begun when the father also disappears. Were you trying to talk about the fratricidal moments of our history?
Yeah. Well, so what I believe in the three-tiered theories of a novel, I say that the work of fiction has to have a kind of personal story to it, a kind of a conceptual interpretation, and a philosophical one. So the philosophical underpinning of that novel is that I wanted it to be a metaphor for Nigeria. So when I went to go to school in Cyprus, I was struck by the fact that North Cyprus was not a even recognized country, but it had infrastructure, than Nigeria, with all our wealth. And so I started to read about the history of Nigeria. And I came to the conclusion that, even though we were in technologically advanced, these various tribe nations, we were doing well, a dope civilization, the Yoruba one and all that, until, the colonial people came and, just incised that unity. So that's a metaphor that I created there. These boys had aspirations at the beginning of the novel. Bembe wanted to be a lawyer. This one wanted to be, until the madman comes from the outside. Yeah. So it's a metaphor of what happens when an external force comes from the outside and disrupts the unity of an entity from the within.
Yeah, also you can say that maybe it's an external force, but it has to be an internal tension. There's a real tension that came from the fact that there was the absence of the father figure. What does that father figure tell about where we are as a country?
Yes. Well, I don't think I went that far, but you're right.
It was this constant motive, the absence of the father.
Yes.
A very strong force
It is.
in the lives of the children.
Yes.
It brings a sort of aspirational temperament to the children, but once it's off, there's something. The mother is almost passive.
Yeah. Yeah, there's you can talk about the idea that the patriarchal system, is everywhere, whether good or bad. So, but for me, the father is the absence, when he leaves. For me, it's like what happens when that force plants the seed, the external force. So it is true that a civilization cannot be destroyed from the outside. It has to come from within. So the seeds is all that you need to plant. And when the watchers, when those who should be looking, the intellectuals are asleep, the gatekeepers, then chaos comes in and disrupts everything.
Well, did you have a lot about June 12 in your mind when you were writing this?
So I always believe that there's no difference between irreality and reality and also fiction. So these are three, or even the extraordinary. So you see in my fiction, real life characters come in. You almost came in, but Ruben Abadi. But so I want to give. I feel like fiction should be like this living thing, that continues to exist, irrespective of the fact that it was imagined. It was a figment of the author's imagination. So that's why you see like actual historical moments being relived. So not just June 12th, but the MKO Abiola election and the brouhaha around that period. So I lived through it at the time I was growing up. So the boys as well do.
What power does Akure have in your consciousness? Akure was the story was based in Akure.
Yes. So well, I was born there. It was the landscape of my imagination was opened up by that moment. I feel that definitively our imagination and even our intellectual landscape is really shaped by the first experiences we have in those formative years. So it was the essence of growing up, and I also wanted to write a tribute to my own family, to growing up in the midst of this crowd of siblings. So that's why I wanted to anchor the story in that specific space.
When you use siblings as a sort of metaphor, are you also referring to the fact that as a nation we are still adolescents?
In a way, yes. As I said before, for me, I think one of the problems that we had, or that we have even in Nigeria, is that unlike ethno-states in the West, for instance, let's take the Scandinavian countries. You have Sweden. They have the Swedish identity, they speak the Swedish language, then they form a nation state. You can say same of France, you can say same of Germany or any number of nations. But in colonial states like Nigeria, Nigeria was formed, the nation state was formed, and then we're trying to have a national identity. So, I use the anecdote about how my grandfather was a Nigerian all his life, but he never knew, or at least half of his life, in the 1910s and 1920s. So I feel like we're still trying to get a national identity. Who really are we? Are we still, I think that there's more fidelity to, the tribal identities first. Then Nigeria is like secondary to most people, even tertiary.
When you were writing The Fisherman, you engage the language in a more formal, more let me say casual sense compared to your new one. Were you less concerned about experimentation at that stage?
Yeah, well, I was 25, 26 when I finished The Fisherman, and it was published around when I was 27, 28. I feel like, you know, even though it had all this, you know, attention given to it, for me it was my formative work. It was just me trying to see what the possibilities of what I could do with fiction. But there was more confidence in coming back to the template and working on a new novel. But also it has to do with the narrative, you know, the perspective of the Chi. So being an ancient spirit, 700 years old. So to me, I was thinking, okay, how would this creature speak? So I needed to equip it with a prelapsarian eloquence, you know, one that would be beyond time itself. So that's why you see some of the grandiosity in its speech coming through.
One thing that strikes me about an orchestra of the minorities is that a spirit is writing. I don't think I've ever read of in a novel, in a modern novel, where a spirit is actually telling a story. How did you come with that concept?
So it was very difficult, but it was just me being tenacious, saying that, okay, I read Paradise Lost by John Milton. So it's a canonical work of poetry that attempts to interrogate the fundamental idea of the fall of man.
Justifying the
ways of God to man. So it was a very pretty ambitious project. But what it does is, I mean, it has Satan, it has God, it imbues all of these creatures with eloquence. But the free will...
Especially Satan.
Especially Satan, you're right, yeah. I think Satan is the most, you know...
It's more grandiose.
Yes, grandiose than God
than Christ
in the book.
Himself,
But what he did there was that he took the fundamental principle of Western civilization and framed it into a book, The Free Will. And I thought, look, I've always been fascinated about the idea of duality that we have in the Igbo worldview. You know, so, and at the center of that is the Chi, because we believe that if there is a corporeal entity, then there will be a duplicate in metaphysical sphere. And that was what I wanted to do. So I wanted to incorporate that into a novel. So how to do that? I think the best way I found was to actually use the Chi as a framework to allow it to speak as unrestricted, untrammeled as possible.
And when you're talking of the Igbo cosmology, you're talking about duality. And I was telling somebody the other day that I could, if I had somebody trying to do a PhD work on Obioma, I would just say, okay, duality in the pursuit of truth, or something like that. You know, fisherman is two brothers. This is the Chi and his host. You know, where does the host begin and where does the Chi end? And both of them are working here. But even then, in the beginning of the book, there is also a strong Christian element there in the makeup of a person. Yeah, in the Christian world, you have the soul, the spirit, and the body. And the Igbo world here, we also have a similar thing, where we have the body, then we have the domain of the Chi, and then we have the mind, that's where the soul is. And then we have the domain of the Chi, that's the spirit, then the corporeal part of it. It is three, which is very interesting.
Yeah. It is. You know, I read widely, I researched every possible thing. Scholars have not plumbed that very deeply.
Yes.
So, so I came to certain conclusions that I'm sure some people will fight me on later on.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for that. But I think that I'm convinced that the chi, because that's the major debate, where does the chi reside? So my conclusion is that the chi does not reside. I think at Chebe and his school on that side came to the conclusion as well that the chi is innate somehow. And I think that evidence proves that, so that's it. So there's the chi, there's the person himself or herself, and I think that there is also the ancestor who reincarnates and becomes your own Yuwa. So that's the triad that you have.
Now the chi in Achebe was, for most part, the chi was always there. And if you fail, maybe it's because your chi did something wrong or something like that. In your own perception of the chi, it was one interesting part where the chi, if the chi is absent, another chi can come in. That's where you can have diseases, madness, and all of that. Then your real chi, we have to try to negotiate with that chi. When to come in. All of these are interesting. But one of the things that strikes me is that you are writing about chi in an age where the average Igbo man does not even care whether there is any chi. When the average Igbo man is thinking about Jesus, or he's thinking about not believing anything, or trying to get his own living and talking of self-responsibility. You are trying to remind us of something that the people are trying to forget.
That's a very good point. I think that for me, I think the fundamental crisis of the literary imagination is, who are we? Why are we suffering? Why are these things happening to us? I tend to say that I conceive my literary consciousness as me trying to understand the question of why we are where we are today. And for me, I think that why don't we try to understand some of these things the way we used to be? So I hope that this book will be a kind of a monument that will show, as you said, most Igbo people even resist. They call you Igbotic if you speak Igbo sometimes. But this is our culture. This is what we used to have. So at least let people of my generation, or even your generation, my dad's generation, at least know about these things. Let them have a book like Paradise Lost for the Igbo people, for the West African, for the Nigerians, where they can say, okay, we had a complex worldview at one point that could be realized in a work of fiction.
Now, where will you put the state? Where will you place the state of Nigerian literature now?
Well, I think it's thriving. As you know, there's a lot of writers who are gaining international attention. I'm not going to name names, but there's quite a number of them, and even in different genres. Most recently, I recommended Onyeka Brightwaite's My Sister's Killer or something like that to the New York Times. So there's just a lot of writers. So I think it's healthy. The only sad thing is that most of us have to practice abroad because of the light. There's a lot of people you're trying to write, and there's only generator buzzing in your head. So it's kind of difficult. But I hope that the time will come when we'll be able to come back home and create here.
Now, how do you write? Do you write quickly? Do you have to go back? Do you have to cancel a lot?
Yeah, so I conceive an idea, the germ of an idea comes implanted into me, and then I wait out this long period when it incubates, and then, so it can take anywhere between 2 days to even 2 years. After then, and I'll just eviscerate myself and write down everything. And so it's a priori in some ways, and then you have everything down. And so the expanding, depending on the genre. If it's a novel, then it takes more time to expand. And so that's how I write. So expansion usually will take about between 2 years to 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
That was the case with this book.
This one, 3 or 4 years and so on. And you said something like, was it the fisherman that the idea was there in you and it took quite a decade before you started fisherman or
No,
this one?
an orchestra of minorities.
Orchestra of minorities, yes. It took quite a decade,
A lot
of time before it
time.
crystallized.
Yeah.
Now I want you to read one part of the novel.
Okay.
So my readers to get a sense of.
Yeah. So friends, again, the Chi is the one narrating, so it's his voice you hear.
Yeah.
Abata Lumalo. The fathers of old say that without light, a person cannot sprout shadows. This woman came as a strange sudden light that caused shadows to spring from everything else. He fell in love with her. In time it seemed that with one slingshot she had silenced his grief, that violent dog that barked relentlessly in this early night of his life. So strong was their bond that his was mended. Even my relationship with him improved, because a man is truly able to commune with his chi when he is at peace. When I spoke, he heard my voice, and in his will, shadows of my will began to lock. If he had lived in the times of the old fathers, they would have said of his state that he had affirmed something, and I, his chi, had affirmed too, as it is wholly true that onye kwe chi ekwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, this is an orchestra of the minorities, and the first one, the fisherman, got a lot of attention. And many people have said, including all the critics, have said this is even a better book. And they said that in the novel, they said that the first novel, The Fisherman, won the inaugural FT Oppenheimer Fund's Emerging Voices Award for Fiction and NAACP Image Award for Debut Author and the Art Seidenbaum Award for First Fiction Los Angeles Times Book Prizes, and was a finalist for the 2015 Man Booker Prize. Translation rights sold in 26 languages. Obioma was named one of Foreign Policy's 100 Leading Global Thinkers of 2015. His stories and articles have appeared in many publications, including The Millions, Virginia Quarterly Review, and The Guardian. So thank you very much for being on this show.
Sir. Thank you.
And I wish you better prizes for this one.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching us on this show. You can catch up with my published column on www.samomatseye.com. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @samomatseye. Until next time,
be good.
Be good.